what the changes in India's population and the differential growth rates of the various states means is that when the next delimitation of constituencies happens, it should have ideally happened in 2026, but given the fact that the latest census, which was supposed to happen in 2021, hasn't even started, it will likely not happen unless Parliament passes decides that it will do so on the basis of the 2011 census. But what will happen is that a state like Uttar Pradesh or a state like Bihar, whose population has increased significantly, will now get more seats. And a state like Tamil Nadu or a state like Kerala, which has managed to control its population, will actually get penalized for that, and the number of seats that they have will stay the same. I'm now one of 1.429 billion Indians. That's the big news of this week, really. The United Nations has put out new data that shows that India has already overtaken China, or if it hasn't, will do so by July 1 in terms of population. We are now the most populous nation on earth. There's no surprise to this. This has been coming for quite some time, and we knew it was going to happen because the UN report is based on data that was actually released last year, and which clearly showed that India's population would overtake China's. But what does this mean? Let's look at the numbers not as one whole, but as demographic slices. So first look at the number of young people. Today, India has around 360 million people under the age of 15. And so if you put all 15-year-olds in a country, you would fill up a little bit more than the United States, which has a population of 300 million, right? So that is the kind of that is the number of young people that we have. Look at people between the ages of 15 and 40, what is typically defined as the prime working age, because the actual working age goes up till 59, but the prime working age, so 15 to 40 is another 600 million people. So you have almost a billion people, 960 million if you want to be exact, between the ages of 0 and 40. That is a really young nation, and it's reflected in our median age. The median age of India is 28 years. How does this compare with China's median age? China's median age is 39. The US's is over 40. So we are a really young country. Now, what does this youth translate into? A lot of people like to talk about something that they call the demographic dividend, and this is a very real concept because typically when a country has a significant number of young people and when a country has a huge population in the working age, it automatically translates into an economic advantage. It's of course one factor, and I will come to that in a bit, but it is a very, very important factor. And if you look at countries in Western Europe, if you look at a country like Japan, they are beginning to face the reverse problem, right? They have an aging population. We have a really young population. But to truly translate into a demographic dividend, this means that these people need to have access to really good educational facilities, and we also need to have really good health facilities so that these are healthy people and these are smart people. These are people who are skilled, who are trained to perform various tasks. And that's really the challenge for this country. The challenges for India on account of this population are primarily along two dimensions, along the dimension of health and along the dimension of education. But there is another interesting aspect to this. It's not as if the population growth rate across the entire country is the same. We are a very, very diverse country, and if you take a split of north and south, you will see a very interesting difference. The fact is, in many of the southern states, the population growth rate is almost zero. The net replacement level has reached a stage where the number of people in that state is almost steady. And as the populations in these states age, they need people or migrants from other parts of the country to go down south. The southern states are anyway richer than the northern states, another reason why migration is happening. So we need to plan for this migration, and we need to make sure that there are no anti-migrant politics at play in this country. But speaking of politics, what the changes in India's population and the differential growth rates of the various states means is that when the next delimitation of constituencies happens, it should have ideally happened in 2026, but given the fact that the latest census, which was supposed to happen in 2021, hasn't even started, it will likely not happen unless Parliament passes decides that it will do so on the basis of the 2011 census. But what will happen is that a state like Uttar Pradesh or a state like Bihar, whose population has increased significantly, will now get more seats. And a state like Tamil Nadu or a state like Kerala, which has managed to control its population, will actually get penalized for that, and the number of seats that they have will stay the same. And there is, there is fairness at this at one level, because you need to have equal representation, right? I mean, which means the same number of people need to represent one MP needs to be equivalent to a certain number of people in the populace. But at the same time, given the kind of federal arrangement that we have in this country, the federal politics that we have in this country, this is going to be a source of friction. But leave politics aside, let's look at the economics. Does India's population advantage automatically translate into an economic advantage over, say, China? Not necessarily. Like we discussed, to really tap or to really leverage its demographic dividend, India will have to invest in education and healthcare. But that apart, we also need to focus on more value addition in the economy, because there is no direct translation of warm bodies into GDP. That happened at a time when there were no sophisticated technologies, when value addition was at a very low level. So we need to focus on more value-added technologies, which is why when India speaks about the importance of chip making, for instance, it is extremely critical. These are the kind of new things that we should really be focusing on, because the more value addition you have in the economy, the more you will be able to realize your demographic dividend. When will India catch up with China? It's an obvious question for many people, and it's a tough question to answer, simply because the time frame is just too wide, and the imponderables are many. You never know what kind of economic shocks are awaiting the globe. COVID, after all, was something that came as a bolt from the blue for all of us. But let's assume that China stops growing a few years from now. By 2028, China stops growing, and India continues to grow at between 7.5% and 10%. Even then, it would take India till 2045 to catch up with China. If China, let's say, slows down and from 2028 onwards grows at 2% and India grows at over 10%, it would still take us till 2050 to catch up. So, reasonably and logically speaking, I think any time between 2050 and 2070 would be when the Indian economy catches up with the Chinese economy. To be sure, there are lots of imponderables in this. There could be some technology that enables economies to make a quantum jump in magnitude, and India might find itself at a natural advantage, in which case we'll reach that number earlier. But as things stand, this is how they look.